Hi everybody, this is going to be a video covering our formal report for experiment number 9. I normally talk about this for 10 or 15 minutes during lab, so I'm going to do a little video instead. So I'm going to start here on Canvas in the assignment section for experiment number 9. I have a video posted that Professor Dahl made. It's a nice, quick, concise video showing the experiment, and it also includes all of the data that you'll need to know. And then the next thing right underneath that, it tells you that your experiment is going to, or your formal report will look like a journal article for the American Chemical Society. And because of that, there's a couple extra websites that I've linked or documents. So I'm going to go through all of the different websites and documents that are linked on this assignment. So the first one is a sample article from the American Chemical Society, just to show you what a scientific journal article looks like, just in case you haven't seen one. We start with the title and the authors, of course, and then we have their abstract and an introduction, followed by results and discussion. And if we scroll down, we'd see an experimental section, conclusion, and references. So you're going to have all of the same information that theirs has. It just might be either not as heavy. Some of their sections are very long, so ours will be a little bit more concise. Now, notice the formatting for this. This article is written in 2 columns, and both sides of the column have nice straight lines, so it's not formatted to the left or to the right or centered. This is called justified formatting. So in order to get that, I have a link to the American Chemical Society website so that you can download the template. There's a template for Mac and a template for Windows. So I'm going to open up my Windows template here. The first page of the template is really a lot of information on instructions. So I'd suggest reading it, but really you're just going to end up deleting that entire page. So page 2 is where the actual template starts. We have a spot for your title, your name. It gives you a lot of information on how to type in your name. Address, that's just going to be SCC's address. A spot for your abstract that you're going to type within those 2 lines. And then the rest of it is the template formatting, but it's also giving you some information. So this small little section right here is telling you about the text. So that's really the main part of your report. And then it has some information about figures. So this would be any type of structures you're adding. We're not going to have schemes or charts, so you can ignore both of those. You will have a table that includes your data, and so it gives you some information there on what your table should look like. The associated content would be if we had any supporting information, so like attached graphs. We don't have any for that, for this report. And then you don't have any lab partners or any funding resources, so you can just ignore this section as well. The acknowledgement section is generally people you would thank that gave you money, so like if you had some type of grant. And then the abbreviations would be if you've kind of created a new abbreviation. Really, you probably won't have any of those, but it's in there just in case. And then we will definitely have references. We're going to use the American Chemical Society reference because you've probably learned APA and MLA in different classes, but in chemistry classes we use American Chemical Society. So different reference style. So I'm going to switch back over here. The next document that is on there is an information page. This is a 1-page document telling you what your report should contain, so all of the content. The guidelines at the top are really information you already know based on our abstracts we've been writing. 3rd person, past tense, use spaces between numbers and units. The first bullet point is really the only thing that's different, telling you to use that template. And we're using the template so that our reports look very nice and formalized. It's also something that if you are headed towards medical school, dental school, any type of post-grad degree, you will need to write in this type of formatting. So it's giving you a little bit of experience. We're going to have our abstract, and then we're going to divide our paper into these 6 sections. So 7 sections including the abstract. So the first section is your introduction, which is really going to include why we're doing the experiment, as well as its connection to the outside world and the world of chemistry. So you're going to put the reaction in there, talk about it a little bit, and when you talk about it, you can talk about that it changes from an amine to an amide, or whatever the functional group is that's changing. You don't need to go into a whole lot of detail. It's not a mechanism we've discussed, so talk about it based off of what we know. For the experimental section, it should be enough information that somebody could repeat the experiment. You should have a table in there like you would put in your lab notebook with all of the physical data for the chemicals that are being used, including the hazards. Make sure that you're including any type of observation. So obviously your observations are based off of the video this time, but there's enough information in that video that you can include some observations. And then right here, it's telling you to include answers to number 1 and number 2. Now these need to be incorporated in. So at the end, don't just put the answer to number 1 is. Incorporate those in. So one of them is talking about why do we add this chemical. So in your procedure, when you say this chemical was added, your next sentence can be, it was added because, and then that way you're answering the question. The results section is the data. So the first thing I say there is to present results, not raw data, meaning don't tell me how much a beaker weighed or a watch glass with the crystals. I only want to know how much the crystals weigh. It should be in a table format, and so this should include the mass, the percent yield, the melting point, and the results from the ferric chloride test. And then you should also include the calculations for the theoretical yield and the percent yield. And then the next section is discussion. So this is where we talk about how well we did, or how well Professor Dahl did. So you're going to compare the data to literature values or expected values. So really, how close was the melting point to the true value? Did the ferric chloride test tell us what we need to know? How close was our actual yield to the theoretical? Is the compound pure? How do you know? Were there any errors? How could it be improved next time? The conclusion is very short. It should really only be a couple sentences. It should state what the goal was and then whether or not the goal was reached. It should not be a repeat of the abstract. It should be a lot shorter than the abstract. And then references, make sure that you're citing anything that you use. So you need to have a minimum of 4 sources. You can use your textbook and your lab book. So there's already 2 sources. And then because you need to have 4, if you're referencing this to something in society, that would definitely be another source. And then if you're getting information for that physical data table, that would be, that would also be another source. So it's not going to be hard to get the 4 sources. The formatting for the 4 sources does need to be in the American Chemical Society format, and you do need to use in-text citations. So I'll show you those in a couple minutes here. In that other information section down at the bottom, for any reactions, you do need to use a chemical drawing program. So I've posted a couple options for these in the past. I can post them again, or really if you just Google organic chemistry drawing program, you'll find stuff. For figures, they need to have a caption that goes underneath, so figure 1 and what it is. Like I said, schemes, you won't have any for this lab report. For tables, again, you're going to have a title for it, so table 1 with a title, and that goes above the title, above the table, so it's the opposite from the figures. And then supporting information, we don't have any for this lab. So I'm going to go over to the reference guide. So this is the citations guide. You will have a couple books because of your lab textbook and your lecture textbook. And then for the most part, you will probably have websites. So I'm scrolling down here to show you where to find that information. Here's a section on websites. So it tells you how to cite them. So really who wrote the website, the actual website, and then what date you went to it. And then for the in-text citations, I have this this website linked. There's a couple different ways to do it. Really, I don't care which one you do as long as you are consistent. So I think one of the easiest ways to do it is to use the superscript numbers. So at the end of a sentence, you're just going to place a number. And then when you list all your references at the end of the document, you list them in this order. So you're not alphabetizing them at the end like we might do with APA or MLA. You would just list reference 1 as whatever it was here. So this is a really good website because it is ACS based, so it has probably the same information that's in the PDF I posted, but it has it all on this website as well. All right, putting all that information together, I've tried to make it as clear as possible by giving you a rubric. So this rubric is really a checklist for the formatting and the content of everything that you need to include. So it has the general items and then those 7 sections: the abstract, the introduction, experimental, results, discussion, conclusion, and the references. It is 50 points altogether, so you can see where those 50 points are coming from. And then, just to give you a little bit more information and some information from past students, I have a handful of formal reports from previous students. So I have a couple on here to show you. So this one is from second semester organic chemistry, but we have the title and the authors there. So the first student, Stephanie, is the one that actually wrote this. They did it in pairs. And then we have the introduction with some very large mechanisms and reactions. But we have the results with the table, and this one's a good one to show some theoretical and percent yield calculations. Microsoft Word has a really good equation editor, so if you haven't used that before, this might be a good time to try it out. This one is by Athan, so this is also second semester. Oh no, I'm sorry, this is first semester. Actually, you guys did a lab very similar to this. Well, you watched me do a lab very similar to this, but it again has the mechanisms and then has the tables of results. So a good example of how to write that report. And then he does have his 4 references in here. And let's see if we can see an in-text citation. Oh, I don't see one popping out at me at the moment. Oh, here's one right here. So there's a small number 2 there to tell us, and a small number 1 there to tell us that where those pieces of information were referenced. And then one more just to show you. So this is Harut. And then, so this is his. So this is also a second semester reaction. But just to give you an idea of what previous students have done, and these are all my Fresno students. I don't have any saved from last semester. But that is all. So hopefully that gets you enough information to get started with your formal report. It's not due for a while. It's not due till actually after you take the final exam for the class. But I wanted to make sure you had this information early so you could start working on it early. I think that is all. Let me know if you have any questions.